All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our January Microcap Conference. My name is Stefan Guillaume. I'm very pleased to host Canoo, ticker GOEV. And with us today from management is Greg Ethridge, CFO. We will have a total of 30 minutes, including Q&A at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Stefan. And happy to be here at the Sidoti Conference to present kind of the latest and greatest on Canoo. And I'm assuming some probably have some context for Canoo, but I'm going to run through the background of the company and our technology and progress, and then we'll open it up for some questions at the end. So what we have here on the first slide is just a photo of the first handful of vehicles that were delivered to the state of Oklahoma at the end of Q4. So they were extremely excited to get those and make sure all of their charging infrastructure and everything was ready. They've been out and about in the streets for the last couple months, for the last couple weeks. And so it's exciting to have those out. And then we have a handful of additional fleet deliveries that we've been working through as well. So just a little background on Canoo. Canoo was founded in 2017. Just for context, other electric vehicle platform companies like Tesla was founded in 2003, Rivian and Lucid were 2007 and 9. So, all of those businesses, obviously consumer facing largely, but also, many, many years of at least of time on Canoo before Canoo was founded by its group of original executives in 2017. And the genesis of Canoo was really, create the maximum functional platform EV, so BEV platform. We call that the multi-purpose platform, where you can then transpose multiple, top hats, so the bodies of vehicles on the exact same rolling chassis, so that multi-purpose platform. And so today we spent about $1.6 billion in this endeavor. We've totally de-risked the technology. We've gone through beta phase, gamma phase, crash testing from a class 1 vehicle perspective, and ultimately have a production-ready vehicle, which we call the LDV 130, which is on the top right of this page, that we've anchored around several of our commercial fleet customers, such as Walmart and Kingby and Zeba and Schindler Elevator and others. But this is what's really unique about Canoo, is that we can take that MPP platform, which I'll show you here in a minute, and really create other use cases for other customer segments. So our initial production vehicle that is being produced now, starting in Q4, and will be ramping up meaningfully in 2024, will be our first variant, as we call it, the LDV 130. And then on the bottom of the page, you see a slightly larger delivery vehicle we call the LDV 190. And then there will be other products that use the same, again, MPP platform, such as the Bulldog pickup truck or other pickup trucks or sports vehicle and other vehicles down the road. But to be very clear, our focus right now is delivering on our very substantial binding backlog, about $750 million of backlog that we've created with our large commercial customers. And there are other customers on the government, as well as potential military and other applications that could come down the line at scale. But today we're focused on the commercial fleet business. So just jumping ahead. So this is the platform that, where it all starts. And to show you a little visual, the multi-purpose platform was really, as I said, developed from the ground up. So not only was the platform on the kind of the wheelbase of a Prius with all the functionality of a very small wheelbase. So you think inner city, very tight turning radius, et cetera, but also given the leaf spring suspension, the fact that the shocks are really embedded in the platform itself, you really get a very functional, usable platform for almost any use case, whether it be consumer, delivery vehicle, or other application. And this is a fully drivable chassis. So you also noticed in the diagram and the picture as it moved forward, we were one of, if not the first, steer-by-wire technology that was inserted in a production vehicle. Now, steer-by-wire, as it's been used a lot recently because Tesla and the Cybertruck has brought it to market. But we've been working on this with one of our suppliers and developed our own technology that has been in place since the early days of the company. And although steer-by-wire is becoming more prevalent, it's still very much on the leading edge. And The benefit of steer-by-wire, and that effectively means that you do not have a mechanical connection from the steering wheel into your front two steering, from the steering wheel itself to your front two wheels. And so that allows for a ton of flexibility in the case where you want to move the seat to a different location. So whether it be left-hand drive, right-hand drive, front, back, etc. You have behind me in my office here actually a race car driver that was driving the rolling chassis actually through the desert. This was probably back in the 2020 timeframe when this was videoed. But it's a really exciting technology, and the reason that that's really important is because 70% of our of our really kind of critical components are in this platform. So that gives us a ton of scale to be able to use that platform across future vehicle variants and reduce cost and simplify design. So we have very few parts, 1,800 parts in our vehicle, compared to tens of thousands of parts in a traditional ICE vehicle. So that reduces cost and ultimately comes back to this minimalist philosophy that was the foundation for Canoo. I mentioned earlier the turning radius of our MPP1 is on with the size of a Prius. Turning radius of a Prius, the size of a small pickup truck, but a payload of a Ram 1500 truck. So there's a lot of different options that you can use our MPP1 in terms of use cases, and that's one of the reasons when Tony Aquila came in and refounded the business and took over as CEO in 2020. He looked at the platform as really the holy grail, and that's what we can use to really be able to create an ecosystem around canoes to be able to collect data, really be able to integrate into our customers like Walmart and other commercial customers. And that was the advent of our shift into the delivery vehicle world. And so that's really important from a risk profile, because today we're not duking it out with all the consumer EVs out there. We're not having to battle with the headwinds of things like, Hertz having to deal with, consumers not liking their vehicles, if they rent something for, a day or two. So I have a couple of quick videos here I'm going to show just to give you a little size, because those of you that haven't actually seen the vehicle will get the benefit of some comparisons. I won't spend a lot of time on this.
The really magical part about this thing is the packaging, okay? Now, in comparison to this, we have a BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe. We've lined them up in the front, okay? Right in front. Which car do you think is longer? Come with me. The Canoo finishes right here. The BMW is over a foot longer than the Canoo.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on these, but basically just to give you some those of you that haven't seen or had a chance to drive in the vehicle, gives you some real world examples of how some enthusiasts and kind of viewed the platform. And I'd just say, hands down, very strong feedback. So when you think about the IP, as I mentioned, we've developed all of our own IP. We have over 235 patents now registered and pending. And the reason that's important is we were not reliant on third parties, in terms of integrating our hardware and software into third parties. Again, that goes back to the simplicity. We have very few ECUs, probably to the tune of a third of the ECUs. That's electronic control components. Every time there's a component, electrical component in a vehicle that has to talk to another component, usually if it's two different, kind of hardware providers, you need an ECU. And the fact that since we have all of our own system designed in-house, we've really been able to reduce the number of ECUs. Therefore, again, kind of the handoff from one system to another can be seamless, and not have to worry about some of those intricacies and, as you make changes on one piece of hardware, how that impacts all the other components within the vehicle. So we have control of the entire ecosystem around the Canoo and the platform itself. I mentioned earlier, that we did design all of these things. I mentioned the steer-by-wire, I mentioned the suspension, but even down to our electric motor, we're not reliant on third parties. We do have third parties producing those for us, but they're all based on our design, our patented design, and our technology. And you can also tell based on third-party studies, when you compare, our components to, other EV components across other, suppliers. In most cases, if not all cases, we actually exceed the metrics. We have 13% greater power density. In our electric motors, our BMS system performs very highly, such that the Department of Defense and others around the U.S. military have been testing, our battery systems for remote power options, for the U.S. military. So really exciting stuff, and I think our technology stands on its own. I mentioned just again to get the business case here is the MPP1 platform is used across all different variants. So you can see here the LDV 190 shifting into the pickup truck, shifting back to, the Bulldog, then shifting back to the LDV 130 or the LV, and it's all on the exact same platform. And again, 70% of our critical functions are in that platform, and about 50, around 50% or 60% of the BOM, and you get meaningful labor savings because we have actually scaled our facility to be able to much more automation and robotics around our MPP1 line, rather than some of the other general assembly and things that will run through the top hats. So as we get into manufacturing, there's economies of scale there. I have some crash test video here, just for those of you that are not as close to the delivery space. Typically larger class vehicles do not require crash testing. Because we started with a consumer offering, we actually went through very extensive crash testing such that we can actually get our crash test ratings up to a level 4, 4-star, 5-star type rating. That is because we are also in the class 1 space. So the benefit of all of that work and testing will then ultimately be carried over to other variants, not 100%, but a large portion of it, given we're using the exact same rolling chassis platform, gets carried over to other product variants as we move down the line. So again, as you think about class 3, class 4, like that's not required. It's just based on U.S. regulation. They don't have to have the same level of testing, and I think a lot of that goes back to class 1 generally is synonymous with consumer vehicles. And one other note from a market perspective, almost every OEM out there has exited the class 1 delivery van. So you think about small ICE delivery vans, there is no product roadmap for current users of that product to replace it unless they come to a company like Canoo to replace that product. So that's also exciting in terms of market opportunity for us, as we're starting with the class 1, then the 190 kind of gets you into that class 2 territory, and then there'll be other iterations into larger vehicles as Canoo's time progresses and process progresses in manufacturing. So this again, I mentioned the ecosystem. Tony Aquila, our CEO, is very much out of the software space. He built a business called Solera, built it, actually founded it in his garage, took it to $1 billion IPO, then ultimately sold it at many billions of dollars to a private equity, and then started a family office. And that's when he was introduced to Canoo and really wanted to imprint his vision on the Canoo platform that you see here, and really thinking about reinventing mobility. The ability to think not about just the first user of the vehicle. These are million-mile chassis, rolling chassis. So if you're building a million-mile vehicle, you can't just think about the first user. You're thinking about the first, second, third, and fourth user. And then along those lines, you have the ability to shift to different top hats. So these top hats here on the left side are all of those use cases I mentioned before. They can over time be actually taken off of the rolling chassis and inserted as a different use case down the road for saving, as I mentioned, with 60% of your BOM cost in the rolling chassis, you have a meaningful amount of savings because you're able to reuse that chassis, and that also gives you ultimately benefits to the life cycle of the vehicle. So it's, again, as he thinks about the total cost of ownership and a delivery vehicle eventually transitioning into a different use case for a consumer or some other operator down the road, that's real value for the second, third, and fourth owners. I mentioned that we have a very strong backlog, $750 million and 18,000 units. Even with a subset of the names on this page, we are sold out in our production over the next year and a half to 2 years as we ramp up production. So that's very exciting. We are building, everything we build is pre-sold. So we're never going to be sitting on inventory, and that's a really important aspect of our business model, is that we're not taking kind of, again, that inventory risk, if you will, from that side of the equation. Everything that comes out of the Oklahoma City facility will be sold as it rolls off the lot. We, in our middle of last year, we had delivered the first 3 units, and this was the first meaningful vehicle revenue to the company when we delivered our NASA vehicles. Don't need to spend a lot of time on this, other than it was a huge stamp of approval for the company. It was also a huge stamp of approval for us being able to get access to other parts of the government. And we have some really exciting opportunities that we've been working on with different parts of the federal, as well as some of the announced things with the state of Oklahoma and other kind of government agencies. So this is again just a really important milestone for the company. We also delivered what we here call the Screaming Eagle. There's a video that I don't need to necessarily show. It's a pretty cool video, but this vehicle was a not an extended cab like you saw on the cover page Bulldog, but a single cab that we developed for the U.S. military's use, sold it to the military. They've had it in testing for over a year. And there's obviously the next variant and iteration of that was the extended cab Bulldog that we announced earlier I guess it was in the fall, in November or so. But you can see the vehicle here on the top left side, and the U.S. military, had very positive things to say. And obviously, as EVs become more prevalent across, consumer, commercial, and government use, the military is spending a lot of time evaluating how do they integrate that technology into their business. And obviously, there's some huge benefits for EV in terms of kind of EV and mobility on the battlefield. I mentioned the battery technology, and it's in testing. We're one of 5 finalists, including Lucid and GM Defense. So we're punching way above our weight in terms of our technology stack. But the Department of Defense Innovation Unit inside DoD is testing our technology around the batteries themselves and other opportunities to integrate that into their systems across all the armed forces. And we're in phase 2 of that, and completing phase 2 of that now. The Walmart purchase order was a huge event for the company when we announced that in the late of 2022. They announced a partnership with us. They also received a share of the company in warrants. So they are true partners. They have the 4,500 unit binding order to purchase from us. And now the mix of those vehicles are still kind of an ongoing discussion with them in terms of LDV 130, 190 versus other use cases, because their business is growing pretty rapidly as well on the e-commerce side, and it's been a huge focus. But that being said, they are true partners, and we continue to iterate on different products for them. You can see here, this was the evolution of the LDV 130 to the LDV 190, and we increased capacity meaningfully by simply extending the back of the vehicle by about 18 inches and squaring out the back. So that's another example of we were able to iterate that, do that very quickly, and ultimately with very little incremental tooling costs, we can produce the LDV 190 at scale as well as the 130, which is our initial vehicle. We are in the final throes here of reaching a 20,000 unit run rate capacity in our facility in Oklahoma City. We originally had a target by the end of last year, but I think just given kind of the state of the markets and kind of being judicious with capital, we wanted to push that out. We're actually just starting to ramp up manufacturing, really at this quarter and next quarter on a very small scale, and then really ramping it up in the second half. And obviously getting all this equipment moved in, set up in the course of about 5 or 6 months, and getting it operational was a huge feat. We still have a few components where we were trying to source robotics and other general assembly equipment. We announced, I think last week, that we had secured a pretty good chunk of assets at a very cheap price from one of our EV competitors that was exiting the North American market. And so there continues to be really great opportunities to pick up assets on at 10 or 15 or 20 cents on the dollar for the hard asset, and then invest a little bit more in terms of logistics to move those to our facility and get them set up. But it's much more efficient than spending hundreds of dollars on this equipment that's available. So we're constantly keeping our eyes open for those kind of opportunistic chances to be able to fill in our capital needs at a fraction of the cost. And ultimately, by the end of this year, our goal is still to get to the 40,000 capacity, which will then support us moving into that 30 to 40,000 unit kind of production sometime in 2025. And that will ultimately bring us into the break even to cash flow positive profile as we're sometime during the course of 2025. On the right side of this page is our prior battery manufacturing facility. So we have about, I think it's about 200,000 square foot facility there, where we have 2 gigawatts of capacity. The Mons line is set up to run. We've secured Panasonic 2170 cylindrical cells. So our battery modules are produced in Pryor, and then they're shipped 2 hours west into Oklahoma City to the main facility on the left side of the page, where our battery system is put together. The 80 kilowatt hour battery is kind of a bedrock of our platform, and it sits in this honeycomb shape on the bottom right of the page. You can see that actually enhances the structural integrity of our frame. So there are a lot of, again, kind of efficiencies and thought process that's gone in to this whole system, and it's really exciting to kind of move this into production. And finally, before I wrap up here, I'll just give a comment out to the state of Oklahoma and the various nations that have supported us. We've been had a ton of support from the governor's office, as well as the state at large, as both kind of creating incentives around workforce training and growth, but as well as as I mentioned, as our first customer. So we're really excited to bring vehicle production back to the state after it exited many years ago. I can't remember. I think it was kind of the mid 2000s, 2006 or 7 or so, since they last produced vehicles there. So they were extremely happy to partner with us, and there's obviously some incentives. None of these incentives have been paid yet, but we did announce, I believe, last week that we did achieve our first milestone with the governor's Quick Action Fund, and we did meet that requirement, and we should be receiving some money from the state here in the near term. So that's also a very exciting first milestone for the company, and we're going to continue to push forward on those milestones. And then I have a short slide, kind of just a conceptual slide here in terms of how we think about it. I think I've touched on all of these points. Domestic manufacturing is really important for us. I think when we think about, go to market, as we're now delivering vehicles, we're having to support those vehicles. And with that, we've been very thoughtful about how we roll out, since we're not selling to, consumers across the board as our initial vehicle. We're able to really control the geography and therefore the support network. And so that way we can continue to make sure we're providing great service to our customers, our initial customers, and then very judiciously expand beyond those initial states. So that's an important element on the domestic manufacturing side, but also having a hub for Canoo in the center of the United States, such that we can reach kind of east and west, north and south as we move forward on our deliveries. I mentioned about the kind of expectations around cash flow. We've been very cautious and judicious with our capital expenditure. We're not going to, unlike some others, we're not going to go out and build state-of-the-art manufacturing without having a product. We have the product, we have the demand, and ultimately now we're delivering on that demand. So, and then I have a short slide here on capital raise. I think last year we raised almost $300 million of capital. We continue to have access to capital as needed. We're obviously thoughtful about that capital and the way that capital is invested, as given kind of the state of the market, given the state of the Canoo stock. We are very sensitive to dilution, but at the same time, we're balancing that dilution with kind of our go-forward plan to ultimately deliver a substantial amount of units this year and move into break even and cash flow positive next year. So I think that's all I have. Maybe we can open it up for questions. I've lost my screen to know where who's online here, but maybe I can leave it to others to guide me for questions. I don't know, John or Stefan, if you guys are on still.
Sure, I can read the questions.
Sorry, because maybe I need to drop the screen. That might actually help me, so I can actually see my I can see my desktop. There we go. Okay, that's much.
Sure. We have a few questions here. I think one of the questions is, how many LDVs were delivered to King B today?
We delivered 2 LDVs to King B today. That was their initial allocation from them. So they're also in testing with a couple of their customers, and we expect to continue deliveries to them.
And are you planning on starting delivery of the LV and the pickup truck in 2025?
The LV and the pickup truck are down the line for us. We have our initial focus, for 2024 and 2025, and the units. I think I mentioned the 3,000 to 5,000 units of expected delivery this year are going to be a mix of LDV 130s and LDV 190s. That'll be the lion's share of the units that are delivered. There will be a handful probably of LVs delivered in the back half of this year as well, but offline LVs. So we're not, our initial volume production is not set up to do LVs on the main line. So we're very focused on the delivery vehicles first, then the lifestyle vehicle to some of our lifestyle vehicle customers second, which will be at low volume. And then there'll be other variants introduced as we get through moving the business to profitability, because that'll lend us, to lots of different options in terms of introducing the pickup truck, both short cabin and long cabin, as well as the other variants that are out there. I mean, we have a lot of ideas, but we have to stay focused on first getting to break even, and ultimately, we need to get units out the door and produced before we can get to break even.
Can you talk about like the King B agreement in terms of contract size, maybe vehicle commitment for Canoo versus other agreements that you've announced?
Yeah, I mean, the initial units for King B, I mean, there's an ongoing conversation with all of our customers, given that we're in this ramp up right now, about what the allocations are. So I can't comment on specific allocations for any of our customers, but you can imagine that with, they have interest in up to 9,300 units. Some of those are firm, and some of them are options, to the extent available. In this calendar year, our expectation for most of our commercial guys fleet is that we would plan to get them several hundred units, but we haven't defined, exactly what those are, and obviously that's subject to availability depending on where we land in that 3,000 to 5,000 unit deliveries. I
think you recently announced that you hired like 100 people, employees in your Oklahoma City facility. In your Oklahoma facility, can you talk about that a little bit? And are you currently producing in OKC? And can you talk about maybe training? How long does it take to train the employees?
Yeah, so that's one of the as we thought about the milestones that we have with the state, and obviously our kind of overlaying that with our ramp up plan for this year. I mean, I think it's known that we have run a little behind schedule. We had trouble kind of securing the site that we secured the OKC site back in April, moved very rapidly to get everything kind of transitioned. Obviously, in advance of moving into these higher volume deliveries later this year, we need to train the workforce. We had that initial 100 plus person hiring that finalized in kind of middle of December, I believe, and then those employees are all in the process of obviously being trained. There was training going on earlier than that with kind of some of our key team leaders. And those leaders were working hand in hand with our other, with our engineers and manufacturing teams, both in Dallas and in Torrance, where we were training the team in OKC with our veteran Canoo employees in Dallas and Torrance. And then obviously that will continue to happen over time as we ramp up the workforce. But as you think about skilled labor and making sure that these are very complicated systems. And probably many on the call have driven EVs, some probably haven't. But you feel like you're driving your iPhone, and it is one of those, that when you're building those and bringing them online on both the hardware side and the software side, it does take a real skill. And so we have to make sure that our teams are fully kind of capable, both as we move into low scale production, as we're in now, but move as we ramp up and get into the end of Q1, into the beginning of Q2, and into the second half of the year. We're going to need to have a multiplier effect on all of that. So we'll continue to hire, but we'll also continue to train. I don't have the specifics around what the training timeline is in the process, but I know it's happening, and I know that we're spending an inordinate amount of time on making sure that all of that knowledge transfer is happening from the many of our legacy Canoo employees in other locations into OKC.
Thank you. And when do you think you'll break even? Like, what is the best case scenario?
Sorry, what's the question?
When do you think you'll break even? What is the best case scenario?
Our break even, kind of our gross margin guidance and break even guidance is we do a gross margin positive in middle of 2025, and by the end of the year, we're break even to positive.
All right, and I guess we have time for one question. What is the typical range of a fully loaded vehicle?
So our EPA rated range on the LDV 130 is 217 miles, and we've done probably near 20,000 miles with Walmart, and we are on the use case again from a delivery vehicle perspective. Obviously, as we move into consumer markets, we'll continue to kind of push the limits of what that range would be. But from a use case perspective on the LDV 130 and the LDV 190, we've exceeded 97% of all of their, their duty cycles during any day. So, that means that even though we're rated at 217, maybe we're making, kind of between 150 and 180 miles a day, with load. And that's meeting their needs, and it's actually exceeding what they're seeing from some of our other competitors that have larger vehicles and have also been selling selling into the likes of Walmart and others. So they've been really, really thrilled with kind of our performance. As you obviously increase the size of the vehicle, the payload of the vehicle, the batteries, as you think about larger variants, all of that math changes. But what I can tell you is today, on our small footprint and what we've produced for Walmart, they've been really happy with the performance relative to some of our competitors.
Any plans, like, do you have any plans to make your vehicle self-driving?
So the way our system is designed is we have the compute power now, and our platform is set up to go to ADAS level 4.5, which is effectively self-driving. We don't have plans to release that yet. We've just built in the ability to upgrade it on a software basis. That's something that we will continue to evaluate. Obviously, there's more programming involved, and that's a process. I don't think the regulatory world is ready for it, and frankly, our fleet and commercial customers on this first version are not going to pay for that kind of technology. And similar to whether it be battery cells or others, we don't want to be the first mover in a lot of these areas. We'd rather be a distant second, third, fourth, or fifth, and still be successful, but not take that that upfront kind of risk. We are going to be releasing our vehicles at a much lower ADAS than a 4.5. I think it's a 2.5 level ADAS for our initial vehicles that are being produced today.
Well, thank you, Greg, so much for sharing your story, and thank you for participating, and thank you, the audience, for your questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stefan, for running this, and thanks for everyone being a supporter of Canoo.
Take care.